The Lame Wolf of Samarkand, 1336–1370. Timur, later immortalized in Western history as Tamerlane, Timur the Lame, was born in 1336 near the city of Kesh, within the region of Transoxiana, modern Uzbekistan. His destiny was to become one of the most feared and devastating military conquerors in recorded history. A man whose personal empire would briefly eclipse the size of Rome's and nearly rival that of Genghis Khan. Timur was born into the Barlas clan, a Turco-Mongol tribe that had long served the descendants of Genghis Khan in the fragmented Chagatai Khanate. He proudly claimed an indirect lineage to Genghis Khan's family, emphasizing his cultural and political connection to the great Mongol tradition of world domination. However, Timur's political environment was defined by chaos. The vast Mongol Empire had fractured into warring successor states, the Golden Horde, the Ilkhanate, and the Chagatai Khanate, leaving a profound power vacuum across Central Asia. Timur was a product of this chaotic, warlord-dominated environment, possessing a formidable intelligence, a fierce personal ambition, and an insatiable appetite for Persian and Islamic culture. His early career was spent not as a prince, but as a local tribal leader and mercenary, building a reputation for ruthlessness and strategic brilliance through small-scale raiding and shifting loyalties. It was during these formative years of banditry and tribal conflict that Timur sustained the injury that gave him his lasting, famous epithet. Around 1363, following either a skirmish or an attempt to steal sheep, Timur was wounded, crippling his right leg and potentially damaging his right hand or arm. This injury resulted in a permanent limp, forcing him to rely on political cunning and military strategy over personal fighting prowess, leading his enemies to mockingly call him Timur Aylang in Persian, meaning Timur the Lame, which eventually reached Europe as Tamerlane. This physical disability became an integral part of his identity, a constant reminder of his struggle and a testament to his sheer will, proving that even a crippled man could rule the world. The pivotal political struggle of Timur's early life centered on gaining control of his home region of Transoxiana, from the encroaching authority of the fractured Mongol state to the north. For years, Timur maintained a complex, shifting partnership with his brother-in-law and fellow ambitious leader, Amir Hussein. Together, Timur and Hussein engaged in a prolonged series of battles and alliances, often switching sides against the forces of the Chagatai Khanate as they fought to establish their joint, independent rule over the region. Their partnership was one of convenience, intelligence, and mutual distrust, destined to fail the moment true singular power was within reach. The inevitable confrontation occurred in the late 1360s, culminating in a bitter, brutal internal conflict that saw Timur rise as the superior military commander and political schemer. In 1370, Timur finally defeated and captured Amir Hussein, immediately moving to seize control of the historical capital of the region, Samarkand. Upon consolidating his absolute power, Timur executed Hussein, and with the primary threat eliminated, he officially declared himself the supreme ruler of Transoxiana. Crucially, Timur understood that true political legitimacy in Central Asia still resided in the line of Genghis Khan. Therefore, although he held all the real power, he never took the title of Khan. Instead, he ruled through a series of puppet Khans who were descendants of Genghis, thereby maintaining the Mongol legal fiction. Timur took the titles Amir, commander or prince, and more importantly, Gurkhan, son-in-law of the Khan, after marrying a Chagatai princess, Sarai Mulk Khanum, using this marital link to claim rightful authority over the vast Mongol heritage he was about to unleash upon the world. The Conquest of Persia and the Golden Horde, 1370–1395. With Transoxiana secured, the focus of Amir Timur's ambition immediately shifted outward, driven by a self-imposed mandate to restore the unity of the Mongol lands and uphold the honor of the Barlas clan. Timur was a devout Sunni Muslim, and his vast campaigns were often framed not merely as conquests, but as jihads, or holy wars, against infidels, heretics, and rival Muslim states he deemed apostate. His first and longest military effort, beginning almost immediately after 1370, was the decade-long brutal subjugation of Persia, encompassing modern Iran, Iraq, and parts of Afghanistan. Persia, rich in history, trade, and intellectual culture, was politically fragmented among petty dynasties following the collapse of the Ilkhanate, making it an irresistible target for a disciplined, unified military force. Timur's conquest of this vast, diverse territory was not a single campaign, but a relentless series of sieges and massacres, earning his empire a terrifying reputation that preceded his armies wherever they went. He moved with astonishing speed and logistical efficiency, demonstrating his genius not only in open battle, but in the often more difficult art of siege warfare, using massive catapults and sophisticated engineering to breach formidable urban defenses. The terror inflicted by Timur was not random. It was a deliberate, calculated tool of psychological warfare. He believed that by setting an extreme example of cruelty in one city, he could frighten dozens of others into surrendering without a fight, thereby saving his own troops and time. The most infamous example of this strategy occurred in 1387, following a revolt in the city of Isfahan. After the city's initial surrender and subsequent uprising against Timur's garrison, Timur ordered a massacre so vast that his soldiers were tasked with building massive pyramids of human skulls outside the city gates. It is recorded that over 70,000 heads were used to construct these gruesome towers, an act designed to send an unambiguous, paralyzing message across the entire region. Resistance meant absolute final annihilation. However, Timur's focus on the wealthy south was repeatedly interrupted by a grave existential threat arising from the north. The resurgent Golden Horde, now led by the aggressive Khan Toktamish. Toktamish, ironically once a vassal whom Timur had helped place on the Golden Horde's throne, sought to reassert the traditional Mongol dominance over Transoxiana. The rivalry between these two powerful men defined the geopolitical struggle of the 1380s. Timur fought two massive, decisive wars against the Golden Horde. The first major confrontation, culminating in the Battle of the Kondurcha River, 1391, saw Timur defeat Toktamish in a brutal, sprawling engagement on the central Eurasian steppe. However, Toktamish escaped, regrouped, and launched further raids into Timur's territory, proving that the threat was not eliminated. The final definitive confrontation came in 1395, when Timur launched a massive counter-invasion, penetrating deep into the heartland of the Golden Horde. Timur's armies utterly destroyed the Horde's most important trading cities, including the magnificent capital Sarai and the economic centers of Astrakhan and Tana. By systematically demolishing the trade routes and infrastructure, Timur did far more than simply defeat an army. He shattered the economic power of the Golden Horde permanently. The victory over Toktamish secured Timur's northern frontier, solidified his reputation as the unchallenged successor to Mongol power, and allowed him to consolidate his vast territorial gains across Persia and Central Asia before turning his eyes eastward and southward. The loot of Hindustan, the invasion of India, 1398-1399. Having secured his immense empire stretching across Central Asia and Persia, Emir Timur paused briefly, not out of exhaustion, but to plan his next most lucrative military venture, the invasion of Hindustan. The target was the fragile, weakened Delhi Sultanate, a Muslim state whose immense wealth was legendary, but whose political and military structure had decayed into inefficiency. Timur's official pretext for the invasion, often cited by his own chroniclers, was religious. He claimed the Muslim sultans of Delhi were too tolerant of their Hindu subjects and were therefore failing in their duty to wage jihad. However, the true, overriding motive was the irresistible opportunity for plunder. The treasures of India were needed to finance Timur's endless wars and to fund the monumental architectural projects in his capital, Samarkand. In 1398, Timur launched his invasion, crossing the mighty Indus River with an army that, while not enormous, was highly disciplined, mobile, and utterly ruthless. As Timur advanced through the Punjab, he left a horrifying trail of destruction, engaging in mass slaughters that grew in scale and brutality as he approached the heart of the Sultanate. He reportedly ordered the execution of tens of thousands of prisoners taken during his advance before the decisive battle. fearing they might revolt once battle was joined. The climax of the campaign came in December 1398 outside the walls of Delhi, where Timur's forces met the army of Sultan Mahmud Shah Tughlaq. The Sultan's army relied heavily on its most fearsome and psychologically terrifying weapon: hundreds of massive war elephants, armored and carrying armed fighting towers on their backs. These giant beasts initially threw Timur's Turkic cavalry into confusion and panic. The Mongol tradition had not prepared his soldiers for combat against such terrifying living siege engines. However, Timur's military genius shone through in his brilliant counter-tactic, a maneuver that perfectly exploited the elephant's fear of fire and confusion. He ordered his soldiers to gather thousands of camels, load them with large bundles of dry straw and wood, and then set the straw ablaze. The panicked flaming camels were then driven directly toward the enemy lines, creating a blinding, chaotic screen of fire and noise. The war elephants, terrified by the burning camels stampeding toward them, broke rank and turned tail, trampling the Sultan's own infantry and cavalry and throwing the entire Delhi line into irrecoverable disorder. The resulting Battle of Delhi was a total rout, resulting in the Sultan fleeing the field and abandoning his capital to the Conqueror. The subsequent sack of Delhi was one of the greatest atrocities of Timur's career, transforming the wealthy city into a smoldering ruin. For several days, Timur's army engaged in a campaign of unrestricted pillage and slaughter, despite Timur's initial attempts to maintain order, resulting in the deaths of tens of thousands of inhabitants. The primary goal of the invasion, wealth, was achieved beyond measure. The treasure looted from Delhi in the form of gold, silver, gems, and slaves was immense, far exceeding the plunder from any of his previous campaigns. Crucially, Timur did not loot blindly. Demonstrating his consistent dual nature, he issued specific orders to spare all skilled artisans, craftsmen, and builders. These thousands of talented individuals were chained and forcibly marched back across the Hindu Kush and Central Asia to Samarkand, where their skills would be put to use, building the magnificent mosques and monuments that would define Timur's glorious capital. By early 1399, satisfied with his plunder and having shattered the Delhi Sultanate, Timur departed India, leaving behind a land utterly devastated, confirming his reputation as the world's most destructive force, before turning his attention to the looming conflicts in the West. The capital of the world and the Western rivalry, 1399 to 1402. Upon returning from the Indian campaign in 1399, Amir Timur dedicated himself to transforming his capital, Samarkand, into the magnificent centerpiece of his sprawling empire. The vast fortunes looted from Delhi and the thousands of artisans forcibly relocated from India and Persia were channeled into a monumental state-sponsored building program. Timur saw architecture not merely as construction, but as a direct physical expression of his piety, his power, and his ambition to make Samarkand the capital of the world. He commissioned colossal structures, including the spectacular Bibi Kanyam Mosque, intended to be the grandest mosque in the entire world, built in honor of his senior wife. He invested heavily in religious schools, madrasas, and the nascent sciences, often surrounding himself with renowned poets, theologians, and astronomers, attempting to reconcile his devastating military reality with the scholarly ideals of Islamic civilization. The sheer scale of these constructions required constant influxes of wealth and skilled labor, which, ironically, meant Timur could never truly retire from conquest. His focus soon shifted to the west, where two formidable powers stood defiant, controlling vital trade routes and refusing to acknowledge Timur's supreme authority: the Mamluk Sultanate and the rising Ottoman Empire. The Mamluks, based in Cairo, controlled Egypt and the highly strategic territories of Syria and Palestine, viewing themselves as the rightful guardians of the Muslim holy cities and the inheritors of the Caliphate. Timur viewed their refusal to submit as a personal and religious affront, compounded by the political necessity of securing the Western trade routes. In 1400, Timur launched his armies into the heart of the Mamluk territories, invading Syria, a campaign characterized by rapid movement and strategic psychological warfare. The campaign culminated in the siege and capture of the ancient cultured city of Damascus in 1401, following a failed negotiation with the Mamluk leaders. Damascus, a critical center of Islamic learning and industry, was subjected to a horrific, sustained siege that quickly led to a negotiated surrender by the city's leadership. Despite a promise of safety for the inhabitants, a dispute over the payment of tribute led to a widespread massacre and the subsequent systematic sacking of the city. Just as in India, Timur targeted Damascus's most valuable non-monetary assets. He ordered the capture and transportation of the city's celebrated artisans, particularly its master weavers, armorers, metalsmiths, and glassblowers. These skilled craftsmen were forced back to Samarkand to enhance the city's industrial and artistic capacity, turning the conquest into an elaborate transfer of culture and technology. The invasion of Mamluk Syria brought Timur's vast empire into direct explosive contact with the territory of the ambitious and aggressive Ottoman Sultan Bayezid I. Bayezid, known as Yildirim, the Thunderbolt, for his speed in battle and his conquests in both Anatolia and the Balkans, was profoundly arrogant and deemed Timur an upstart Turco-Mongol barbarian. The rivalry escalated quickly into a highly personalized exchange of aggressively insulting and humiliating letters, wherein both rulers demanded submission and declared themselves the supreme ruler of the Muslim world. Timur accused Bayezid of failing in his duty to wage holy war against the Christians, focusing too much on the Balkans, and of unjustly conquering Muslim lands, while Bayezid mocked Timur's humble origins and crippling injury. This escalating personal animosity, combined with the strategic necessity of removing the only remaining power capable of challenging Timur's absolute dominance over the Islamic world, set the stage for the final, greatest military confrontation of Timur's life. The Clash of Titans, the Battle of Ankara, 1402. The personal rivalry between Emir Timur and the Ottoman Sultan Bayezid I had reached an explosive point, setting the stage for one of the most consequential military engagements of the medieval era. Timur launched his invasion of Anatolia, fully focused on destroying the Ottoman Empire, which he viewed as an obstacle to his absolute control over the entire Islamic world. Bayezid, confident due to his decades of victory against European and Byzantine forces and blinded by arrogance, initially underestimated the logistical and tactical genius of the Lame Wolf. The initial strategic maneuvering demonstrated Timur's overwhelming superiority in planning and execution. Timur successfully bypassed the Ottoman main army, which was deployed further east, seizing control of the strategic fortress city of Sivas in 1400. The capture of Sivas, which included a horrific massacre of its largely Armenian Christian garrison and defenders, served as a terrifying demonstration of Timur's resolve to penetrate deep into Ottoman territory. Timur then executed a masterful tactical move, marching his massive army around Bayezid's forces and establishing his camp near Ankara, effectively challenging the Sultan on ground of Timur's choosing. Crucially, Timur's engineers secured the Kubuk stream, the primary water source for the entire region. When Bayezid's exhausted army arrived in the midsummer heat of July 1402, having been forced to march quickly to meet Timur, they discovered that their vital water supply had been diverted or destroyed by the enemy. The scene was set for the Battle of Ankara in July 1402, a colossal engagement that pitted Timur's vast, multi-ethnic army against the disciplined, but now fatigued and dehydrated, forces of the Ottoman Empire. Timur's tactics were textbook Mongol warfare. He utilized his signature tactical flexibility, employing feigned retreats, enveloping maneuvers by heavy cavalry, and overwhelming firepower from his massed archers. However, the most decisive factor in the battle was political defection. A large contingent of Turkic and Tatar cavalry within the Ottoman ranks, who had only grudgingly submitted to Bayezid's rule and felt neglected in favor of the Sultan's Balkan campaigns, saw Timur as their more legitimate Turco-Mongol leader. In the heat of battle, these thousands of critical troops deserted the Ottoman lines and immediately defected to Timur's army, causing a catastrophic collapse in Bayezid's center and flanks. The outcome was an overwhelming victory for Timur, a total rout that left the main Ottoman army shattered and destroyed. Sultan Bayezid II, the fearsome thunderbolt, fought bravely to the bitter end alongside his elite janissaries, but he was ultimately overwhelmed and captured alive by Timur's forces. The capture of the Ottoman Sultan was a monumental, unprecedented political catastrophe. It was the first and only time an Ottoman Sultan was ever taken prisoner by an enemy commander. Timur publicly humiliated his proud rival, though the famous legend that Bayezid was displayed in an iron cage is likely a myth invented by later chroniclers. What was undeniably real was the collapse of the Ottoman state. Timur's victory unleashed a civil war between Bayezid's sons, plunging the empire into a period known as the Ottoman Interregnum, or the Fetret Devri. By dismantling the central authority and restoring independence to the various Turkish principalities across Anatolia, Timur effectively halted the Ottoman expansion into Europe for half a century, dramatically shifting the geopolitical balance of power across the entire Mediterranean and Middle East. The summit of empire and the final ambition, 1402–1404. Following the unprecedented victory at the Battle of Ankara and the capture of the Ottoman Sultan, Mark Antony, Emir Timur stood at the uncontested pinnacle of global power. He spent the immediate years after 1402, ensuring the complete destabilization and fragmentation of the Ottoman Empire, systematically restoring the small Turkic principalities in Anatolia to prevent the swift resurgence of a unified Turkish state. Timur then secured his western flank by forcing immediate submission and tribute from the terrified remnants of the Mamluk Sultanate in Egypt, and most notably, the long-suffering Byzantine emperor in Constantinople. The Byzantine emperor, previously under siege by the Ottomans, was now an unlikely vassal of the Turco-Mongol conqueror, demonstrating the radical realignment of global power. This period marked the apex of Timur's reign. His empire now stretched across the width of Asia, commanding unparalleled wealth, resources, and military manpower. European powers, including embassies from Castile, Spain, and France, dispatched envoys across the known world to Samarkand, viewing Timur as a potential, vital ally who could protect them from the now fractured but still formidable Ottoman threat. These detailed European accounts provide invaluable insight into the sheer organization and grandeur of Timur's court during this brief moment of relative peace. In 1404, Timur finally returned in a massive triumph to his beloved capital, Samarkand, bringing with him the last of the immense loot and artisans captured from the Ottoman and Mamluk territories. He devoted his energy to the final phase of his architectural vision, completing the monumental Bibi Kanyam Mosque and the Gur-e-Amir Mausoleum, creating a city of breathtaking turquoise domes and vast tiled surfaces. Samarkand became a hub of intellectual exchange, where the sciences, astronomy, theology, and philosophy flourished under Timur's direct, though demanding, patronage. Yet, despite his advanced age and his crippling physical ailments, the restless ambition that drove Timur's entire life refused to be satisfied. He declared his final ultimate objective, the conquest of China, ruled by the Ming dynasty. Timur viewed the conquest of China as the necessary final step to truly legitimize his rule, uniting the entire Mongol world and fulfilling the destiny of his ancestral connection to Genghis Khan. He perceived the Ming dynasty, which had overthrown the Mongol Yuan dynasty in the 1360s, as a band of usurpers who needed to be violently returned to their Turco-Mongol overlords. The logistics for the Chinese campaign were staggering, involving the planning and mobilization of what was intended to be an army of up to 200,000 soldiers, one of the largest forces ever assembled for a single campaign. Timur began accumulating vast stockpiles of grain, fodder, and supplies, preparing for the colossal undertaking of crossing the harsh, desolate steppes in the height of the unforgiving winter. He officially launched his final great campaign in late 1404, setting out from Samarkand and marching eastward, fully intending to place the final crown of the world upon his head. The Death of the Conqueror and the Shifting Sands, 1405, and Legacy. In the winter of late 1404, Emir Timur launched his final and most ambitious undertaking, the massive invasion of China, aiming to restore the Mongol legacy and cement his status as the unchallenged master of the world. The scale of the mobilization was immense, but the timing was disastrous. The The relentless Central Asian winter proved to be the greatest obstacle the conqueror had ever faced. The intense cold and severe weather conditions rapidly slowed the movement of the colossal army, overwhelming the already strained logistical supply lines. Timur, nearly 69 years old and physically frail from decades of warfare and his crippling injury, struggled to endure the harsh conditions of the march. The campaign came to an abrupt, stunning halt in February 1405 near the remote city of Otrar in modern Kazakhstan. Timur fell gravely ill, likely suffering from pneumonia or a severe fever exacerbated by the extreme cold and his advanced age. In a twist of irony, the man who had ordered the slaughter of hundreds of thousands of lives and whose military genius had defeated every major opponent, from the Golden Horde to the Ottoman Sultan, was defeated not by an army, but by the natural elements. Timur died unexpectedly in Otrar in the deepest part of the winter, just 2 months into the China campaign. His death was a political and military thunderclap that instantly paralyzed the largest army in the world. Timur had designated his grandson, Pir Muhammad, as his successor, but the succession plan was vague, lacking the institutional force of law or a stable political structure. The enormous army, which was loyal only to Timur's personal charisma and genius, immediately dissolved. Generals, sons, and grandsons abandoned the China campaign and began a frantic, devastating race back to Samarkand to seize power, initiating a prolonged, brutal period known as the Timurid Civil Wars. The empire that Timur had forged through 5 decades of relentless warfare collapsed almost as swiftly as it had been built. Within a generation, the empire fragmented into numerous small, warring principalities ruled by his descendants, proving that Timur had mastered the art of conquest but failed to master the art of stable political governance. Timur's physical remains were ultimately returned to his beloved capital and interred in the magnificent Gur-e-Amir mausoleum in Samarkand, the city he had built using the plunder and artisans from the shattered kingdoms of Persia, India, and Syria. His enduring legacy is one of the most complex and contradictory in history. He was the last great nomad conqueror, a tactical and strategic genius who never lost a battle and whose military doctrines were studied for centuries. He was also a man of immense culture, a devout patron of Islamic arts, sciences, and theology, ushering in the spectacular Timurid Renaissance that saw a flourishing of Persianate culture. Yet this unparalleled brilliance came at an unfathomable cost. Historians estimate that Timur's campaigns may have directly caused the deaths of as many as 17 million people, or about 5% of the world's population at the time. Timur remains a towering figure, a crippled man who mastered terror and artistry in equal measure, leaving behind a legacy defined by both the beautiful, serene domes of Samarkand and the dark, terrifying shadow of the pyramids of skulls.